All right. Daniel chapter 11, verses 1 through 20. The time between the testaments. The time between the testaments. Daniel chapter 8 covered a lot of this information. Now Daniel chapters 11, 2 through 35 expands upon it with so much detail that it's amazing, considering it was written in 539 BC, more than 200 years before Kelly was born. I'm sorry, that's not what. More than 200 to over 300 years before these events happened. That's what it. Sorry. These events are the times between the prophets and John the Baptist. This time between the testaments is what it's called, usually around 400 to 4 BC. The book of Daniel was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, affirming what was already proven, that Daniel was written in the 5th century BC. Only God knows the future, and only God can be 100% accurate in Bible prophecy. Only God can tell the future. Nobody with a crystal ball or tarot cards or reading your lines can tell the future. Nostradamus was wrong half the time. And he made general observations that anybody could make. And of course, they read a lot into what he said, so all that. Okay, first of all, Gabriel stands with Daniel. Daniel 11:1, and also I in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. He is responsible for helping and defending me. Also I in the first year of Darius the Mede, I, Gabriel, arose to be an encouragement and protection for him, Daniel. This is the beginning of the things that Daniel was told in this vision by Gabriel. Some believe this was actually King Cyrus instead of Darius, because it says Darius the Mede. But I'm no historian, so whatever the Bible, if the Bible says Darius the Mede, then that's good enough. The messenger of Daniel 10:10 continues to speak of assisting Michael, even as Michael had strengthened him in the battle of demons in Daniel 10:21, confirming Darius in his purpose of kindness to Israel in decreeing they're allowed to return to Israel. Darius the Mede, the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar was gone, and they came in and captured Babylon. The Medes and the Persians became the second world power, and they got rid of the Babylonians, and they took over. And Darius the Mede allowed Israel to return to their homeland after 70 years of captivity, as Jeremiah predicted. The first year of Darius, this is the same year as the revelation of 70 weeks, 539 BC in chapter 9. The 70 weeks, we talked about those this morning. That's in Daniel chapter 9. At the beginning of the Persian administration, the divine messenger stood up to confirm and strengthen Darius. This angel stood up to strengthen Daniel at the beginning of the reign of Darius the Mede. Because here's this old man, Daniel, getting ready to serve under another king, another ruler, this time not a Babylonian. He had served in the Babylonians since he was a teenager. So this suggests that though the kingdoms of the world are under demonic control, their human rulers can be delivered from that control and used for a higher purpose by God as he sees fit. God uses human rulers all the time. God appoints the rulers of nations. But there's also demonic activity in the rulers of these nations in these areas. We know demons are in control of a lot of the areas of the world, especially the Middle East, where Satan has his army centered, I believe, around Israel and Jerusalem, in that area, the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, the old Ur of the Chaldees, the old Babylonian Empire, which is in rubbles, but that's still that Tower of Babel area, the land of Shinar. It's still, I think, a demonic headquarters for today. Matter of fact, I think the bottomless pit mentioned in the book of Revelation has to be in that area. That's going to be the pit that the demons are not wanting to be put into, and that Satan's going to be in that pit for 1,000 years and then released for a little season. Daniel 11 verses 2 through 45, as in Daniel 8, 3 through 26, this prophecy sweeps all the way from the history of the spiritual conflict in Israel to the tribulation. Daniel 11, 36 through 42 talks about the tribulation. And the Antichrist will be brought up more in this chapter later on, and then in chapter 12. when Michael aids in fully delivering Israel, Daniel 12:1. The detail of this history is so minute and so accurate, so confirmed by history, that unbelieving critics have, without evidence, insisted that it was actually written 400 years later than Daniel wrote it. They think it was actually written in around 100 BC instead of 539 BC. And some even have it for the 1st and 2nd century AD. So, without any evidence, just because, their evidence, it's too accurate. That's pretty good when God's word, and the prophetic word, is too accurate to be written when it was. And that's the reason people don't believe it, with no other evidence. But we know the book of Daniel was written in 539 BC, or around that era. The prophecy actually looks ahead from Daniel to the final Antichrist as we close out the book of Daniel. So in Daniel 11, verses 2 through 35, unfolds the near fulfillment of the Persian kingdom and the reign of Greece through the Antiochus Epiphanes, who we've looked at before in the book of Daniel. Okay, the kingdoms of Egypt and Syria in Daniel 11, 2 through 20. Daniel 11, 2, and now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And what I'm now going to tell you is true, the angel said. 3 more kings will rule over Persia, followed by a fourth, the Medes and the Persians, who are in charge of the Babylonian area right now. There will be 3 more kings will rule over Persia, followed by a fourth, who will be richer than all the others. At the height of his power and wealth, he will challenge the kingdom of Greece. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 kings are going to rise in Persia. The fourth will be greater than all of them. When he becomes strong through his riches and his power, he will stir up the whole empire against the realm of Greece. The scene shifts from Greece, Daniel 11:2. These Persian kings are speaking of those who reigned after Babylon was taken by Cyrus. Those were these kings were Cambyses in 530 to 522 BC, Pseudo-Smyrtus in 522 BC, and Darius I Hystapes in 522 to 486 BC. Did you all take notes? Because there will be a quiz later. That's what college professors will tell you. They'll go over it real fast and say, I hope you took notes of that. I'm not repeating it. And then you're going, you look at your neighbor's paper. Or you ask your class, you go to your dorm room and call up somebody that was in the class and say, you got those notes? No, you got those notes? Well, I thought you was taking those notes. And next thing you know, you got a D on the quiz. The fourth is Xerxes I, called Ahasuerus in Esther 486 to 465 BC is when he lived. He's the king after Xerxes. Kings after Xerxes are not included because Xerxes' failed military campaign against the Greeks in 581 to 479 BC sat at the beginning of the end for Persia, which finally fell in 331 BC. 2. Alexander the Great. The Persian Empire was defeated in 331 BC by Alexander the Great. Okay, Daniel 11:3, a great king. And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion, do according to his will. Then a heroic king will appear. He'll rule over the huge empire and do whatever he wants. He will be a mighty, warlike, threatening king who will arise and rule with great authority and do as he wants. The mighty king is Alexander the Great, as we'll see in Daniel 11:4. This is speaking of Alexander the Great of Greece. Alexander the Great destroyed the armies of Persia, was a powerful ruler. Many thought he might rule the world, and many thought he did rule the world. Oddly, he died at the age of 33, the same age as Jesus Christ. Not saying that he was Jesus Christ or anything like him, but he was an indirect prophecy was he an indirect prophecy of Jesus Christ to come? Alexander was not remotely like Jesus, but he was a great king who ruled the known world at that time. Was that a portend of the ruler Jesus Christ to rule the world at the end of the tribulation and the 1,000-year reign? Probably not. Daniel 11:4, and when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven, not to his posterity, but according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. At the height of his powers, his empire will break up and divide it into 4 parts, because Alexander the Great died. Kings not descended from him will rule in his place. That is, he did not have any descendants. So some of his generals ruled in his place. But they didn't have the power he had. So almost as soon as Alexander rose to power, he died. His kingdom was divided, the Bible says, toward the four winds of heaven. It was given to 4 generals, and we went over that this winter. I went over that in chapter, I think it's 8 of Daniel. Daniel 8:22. Kingdom of Alexander was divided into 4 parts among his generals, not among his posterity, that is, not among his heirs. He had no heirs. The death of Alexander in 323 BC. His 4 generals were not of his lineage. They were his 4 generals, and they divided the empire among themselves. So, the king of the south is Egypt. One of the princes under the kings arises to overthrow the king. The king of the north, Aram or Syria, receives emphasis in Daniel 11:5 and after. As time moved on, other leaders ruled, crossing and recrossing the area of Israel. More kings, 11 verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong. One of his princes shall be strong. Above him have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. The king of Egypt will be strong. One of his generals, however, will be even stronger and rule a greater kingdom. The king of the south is Egypt, strong. And he will be strong, have a prince who is stronger than he and have dominion over him. And having predicted there would be 4 divisions of the Greek kingdom in Daniel 11:4, the angel here speaks of 2 of them, the Syrian kingdom just north of Palestine and the Egyptian kingdom to the south. The first king of the south, that is, Egypt, was Ptolemy I Soter in 323 to 285 BC. One of his princes refers to Seleucus Nicator in 311 to 280 BC. Getting these names? The king of the south represents the Ptolemies, leaders of Egypt, contrasted often in Daniel 11:5 with the king of the north, the Seleucids, leaders of Syria, Daniel 11:6. South and north are in relation to Palestine, which the angel, or not Palestine, but Israel, which the angel Gabriel, speaking in the passage, is so concerned. See, it's all about Israel. It's all about how these nations relate to Israel. It's always about Israel in the Bible. Daniel 11:5 through 20 talks about, is going to cover 200 years of wars between these bordering powers to Israel. Daniel 11:6, and the end of the years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. After a number of years, the king of Egypt will make an alliance with the king of Syria, give him his daughter in marriage. And we're going to see this famous daughter that you've seen in the movies. Yes, there's a movie star in Daniel chapter 11. Yeah. Played by, what was her name? Y'all can tell me later. Richard Burton I'll tell you who he played. But anyway, it'll come to me in about 6 hours. But the alliance will not last, and she and her husband and her child and the servants that went with her all be killed. After some years, the Assyrian king of the north, remember Syria rules to the north, Egypt to the south. Syria north, they're right north of Israel. Egypt is kind of southwest, but it's considered south. And the Egyptian king of the south will make an alliance. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to make an equitable and peaceful agreement, but she will not retain the power of her position, nor will he retain his power. And I read about the story of this queen. Her name was Bernice, and she had a terrible end, and because of family squabbles and stuff. I mean, families and brothers and sisters just killed each other. I mean, we talk about it with our brothers and sisters. These literally did it. When your sister there said, I'm going to kill you, you better head for the hills. She's going to do it. The king of Egypt shall enter into the kingdom of the north to make an agreement. It appears as a daughter tries to marry to help an agreement to be signed. They used the daughters back then to form agreements with other nations. Solomon married daughters of kings to solidify agreements and treaties with those kings. So that's a practice that's gone on forever. Bernice, the daughter of Egypt's Ptolemy Philadelphus, 285 to 246, married King Antiochus II Theos, 261 to 246 BC. The latter part of this verse refers to the political advantage they hoped that the alliance would produce. Antiochus divorced his wife to marry Bernice. Later, that divorced wife murdered Bernice, her baby son, and even Antiochus by poisoning him. How sweet. Thus she brought her own son, Seleucus Callinicus, to the throne. Daniel 11:7, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. Okay, king of the north, Syria. All right. Soon afterward, one of her relatives will become king. He will attack the army of the king of Syria, enter the fortress, and defeat them. But out of her branch, her family roots will one, her brother Ptolemy Euergetes, the first, shall arise in his place, and he will come against the Syrian army and enter the fortress of the king of the north. He will deal with them and will prevail. The murdered Bernice's brother stood in his father's place. His name was Ptolemy Euergetes of Egypt, 246 to 222 BC. And he conquered Syria, sacking their great treasure. Daniel 11:8 tells about the sacking of the treasure. He shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold. He shall continue more years than the king of the north. King of the north is Syria, king of the south is Egypt. He will carry back to Egypt the images of their gods, their little god statues, and their little statues and articles of gold and silver dedicated to those gods. You go into a kingdom back then and you wanted to take their gods to show which gods were stronger, the Egypt gods or the Syrian gods. And if you took their gods, that means your God was stronger. And they used them. They're like all other false religions. They'll take another god just in case. Like the Hindus. You tell them about Jesus Christ and they'll say, yeah, I'll receive Jesus. And you think, wow, we're doing great here in India. We've won millions to Christ. No, you haven't. They'll take any god on with the rest of their gods. They believe in multi-gods. Gods for everything. Gods for wood, gods of metal, gods of microphones, gods of recorders, gods of paper, whatever. They'll take Jesus too. So they haven't really received him as the only God. That's why Jesus said, I am the only way, the truth, and the light. Not another way, not an add-on. I am the only way. You have to forsake all other gods. What's the first? God said, I am the first of the 10 commandments. You shall have no gods before me. I am God. There's none else but me. Worship no other gods but me. And that's the problem with mankind today. And look at the confusion in these countries. I mean, I'm reading this to you, and I know your mind's going, huh? What? It's intended to be that way, to show you the confusion, the uproar, the wickedness, the backroom deal making, and the immorality of these people that have nothing to do with Christianity and nothing to do with Jesus Christ. This is what the devil does. This is how the devil makes a kingdom. And you read this and you say, how confusing. What's wrong with these people? They're all after power and money. Always follow the money. Verse 9, so the king of the south, Egypt, shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. The king of Syria will invade Egypt. He will be forced to retreat. The king of the north will come into the realm of the king of the south, but he will retreat to his own country, badly defeated. Syria's Callinicus attacked Egypt in 240 BC, but retreated soundly beaten. Daniel 11:10. But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up, even to his fortress. The sons of the king of Syria will prepare for war. Their father was badly beaten, so they're going to gather a larger army than he had. One of them will sweep in like a flood and attack the enemy fortress. His sons are preparing for battle to do what their father could not do, and assemble a great multitude of forces. Keep on coming and overflow the land of the south, and pass through, so that they may wage war against as far as his fortress, which means his inner They get as far as his fortress of solitude, I guess, where the king of Egypt considers himself safe. It's like the bunker that the president has. Seleucus' sons, successors, kept up war against Egypt as described in Daniel 11:11 through 35. Daniel 11:11, and the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. In his anger, the king of Egypt will go to war against the king of Syria and capture his huge army. The king of the south, Ptolemy the fourth, Cleopatra of Egypt, will be enraged and go out and fight with the king of the north, Antiochus III the Great, and the Syrian king will raise a great multitude army, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of the Egyptian king. The word choler means bitter. Said the king of the south shall be moved with choler, with bitterness. His bitterness caused the king of Egypt to come against the king of Syria. The army, spoken of as a multitude, was about 75,000. The multitude falls into enemy hands. They were defeated there. Ptolemy IV, Cleopatra, devastated the Syrian army under Antiochus III the Great, 223 to 187 BC. Egypt's advantage would be brief. Now, there's a lot of Antiochuses. There's Antiochus IV is the really bad one, who goes into the temple, and he's coming up here shortly. He goes in the temple and sacrifices a pig. But there's four Antiochuses. These are kings of Syria, kings of the north. Remember now, these are all neighboring Israel. To try to make it simple, is these people are fighting wars back and forth going across Israel. How does the king of the north get to the king of the south? He's got to come through the promised land. At that time, there's nobody there. Remember? They were allowed to return in 516 BC from Babylon. And they were very small in population and were kind of scattered around. And soon they would be under Roman control. We'll see. I don't remember if it gets to that or not. And then they would start trickling back in. You see, there's a bunch of turmoil going on here. And God's people were allowed to return and did, but not in great numbers. So, Daniel 11:12, and when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. He will be proud of his victory and of the many soldiers he's killed, but he will not continue to be victorious. When the his army is captured and carried away, the heart of the Egyptian king will be proud, arrogant. He will cause tens of thousands to fall, but he will not prevail. Even though the multitude was captured, their captor is not strengthened. Great numbers do not make a great army, as Alexander the Great proved. Great leadership and great causes make a great army. What about our army today? Are we fighting a good cause if we go into Ukraine? We don't know what we're fighting for. They won't tell us the truth. They're not rallying public opinion. They're trying to rally it against a bunch of uncertainties and lies and misdirection, and media is not telling us the truth. No one's telling us the truth about Ukraine. There's a few people that are carrying signs saying free Ukraine and stand up for Ukraine, but the whole nation, and we haven't rallied around Ukraine, have we? And if we go fight a war like that, it's going to be like Vietnam. It's going to be like Korea. There's no rallying of the populace. You have to have a great army, but you have to have a great cause. That's why the Russians can't do any good. They can't get their people to back them. That's why China can't do any good, because the people aren't in it. Their hearts aren't in it. That's why the Japanese fell. Now, they did well for a while because they were under the impression that the emperor was God, and whatever he told them to do, they must do it. And for a while, they were strong until they started losing. They couldn't believe it. They went in there and bombed Pearl Harbor and had great success, and the emperor's divine, and he told them the right thing, and they did the right thing. They were fired up. They were ready to attack. They were invading China, people. Japan, look at a map. Look at the globe. A little slither of land attacking China. And they were winning. We had to send people over there and airplanes. We didn't put troops on the ground. But we sent lots of bombing missions over there to help China defeat the Japanese. We helped China again and again. And what's our thanks? They take everything we have. They buy up our country. But people their hearts have to be in it. A Christian army. We're an army of soldiers for Christ. We should be fired up and ready and go. We're fighting for the greatest cause of all. Now we're not fighting with guns and bullets and all that, and bombs, but we're fighting with the sword of the Spirit and those weapons of warfare mentioned in the Bible, in the New Testament. We're fighting a righteous fight. That's why the church, though small in number, we're still here. Our churches are still here. We're still preaching the gospel. We're still reaching people for Christ. We are not giving up or backing down, and we're going to win. Have you read the Bible? The end? We win. We cannot lose. Now that makes a great army. We're fighting with a great leader, God of the universe and His Son Jesus Christ, and we are fighting a great cause, the salvation of men, women, boys, and girls, and eternal glory of God is our goal. The glory of God is our goal, not our glory, but His glory and our good. If we bring Him glory, He brings us good. When the chips are down. But the church, when we truly do encourage one another. When we hear someone come up and preach, or someone teach a class, or someone lead in prayer, and we say, that was really good. We're not in competition here. We love one another and want to encourage one another. Hey, the more of us there are, the better it is for all of us. Amen. And do we want less Christians? I think some church leaders want less. So that, I don't know what they think, how that's going to help them. Less Christians means more wicked, right? We want more righteousness. Makes it easier on all of us. What about the border? Wouldn't you rather have Christians in charge of the border? Wouldn't you rather have Christians in charge of the schools? Wouldn't you rather have Christians in charge of the army and the Navy and all that? Wouldn't you rather have Christians in charge of the government? See what happens when we just want to get all we can and can all we get, and we'll just keep our little group, help it survive. That's the Shakers, the religion. You've heard about the Shakers in Kentucky, and boy, they were, I hate to say the word stupid, but they were pretty dumb. I don't know how to say this any other way, but they didn't believe in intercourse. And how do you expect to multiply and have more of you? I guess they were dependent on recruitment. But let me tell you, this is not going to be online. I can say it. I'm Facebook. I don't know if it's working. Too bad. But HXs don't multiply or reproduce. But there's more of them. I used to say every day, every minute. You know what HX is? That's our code word, Donnie. We have to use code words here. And they don't multiply, they can't multiply, but there's more of them every minute. And they are running over our school system. Daniel 11:12, when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up. I'm not going to be able to finish this, so don't panic. Jack's got 8 more verses to go. No, I'm not going to be able to get many more, maybe a couple more. And when he shall take away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. He will be proud of his victory, and of his many soldiers he's killed. But he will not continue to be victorious. When the multitude army is captured and carried away, the heart of the Egyptian king will be proud, arrogant. He will cause tens of thousands to fall, but he will not prevail. Gideon's army of 300 caused the multitude. The Bible says they were like grasshoppers, the Amalekites and the Midianites, to flee. An army of 300 caused a multitude to flee. The size of an army is not important, but the size of our God is what's important. God's blessing upon that army is what is important. And let me tell you, we have been out of heart, and I hate to say it, but the army of God is so splintered, and we've lost our love of the Bible. We don't even stand for the truths of the Bible. We're afraid. We become cowards, afraid to speak up, afraid to say things. Every preacher in Kentucky and the United States ought to have already been banned from Facebook and YouTube. I'm surprised it took me so long to get one strike. I mean, I've tried for years, and I finally got a strike. And now I don't know what's going on with Facebook. I've just been a bad boy, according to those people. You better be getting ready to save some money for my bail. I don't know what's going to happen. But we cannot be afraid. We cannot be cowardly in this time, because we don't have much time left. I was listening to a guy on the way to church talking about the rapture. He thinks it's going to be in the spring, Irvin, because I knew I'd forget. Because, why? It was because, I don't remember, but he says it's going to be in the spring. Could be any time. And he's a very good Bible teacher, and very good. He had good reasons. I just can't remember what they are. And he says it has to do with the when the church started. The church started during the Pentecost, which is during the spring. And that's why he thinks the rapture is going to be in the spring. Of course, I kind of lean toward the Feast of Trumpets, which is on my birthday in September. So it just sounds right. But we can't set a date. I believe the rapture can happen anytime. I think it's going to surprise everybody. Obviously, the rapture is going to surprise you. If it did happen on September 20th, it's still going to be a surprise, because we're not really saying, yeah, I know that's when it is. I'm ready. No, none of us we're all going to be surprised when we're in heaven in the twinkling of an eye. You will be in God's presence that fast. We'll be in the clouds and headed for glory, changed in an instant, in the twinkling of an eye. That's faster than you can think. Well, not me, maybe you. I don't think very fast anymore. When they used to meet kids would say, think fast, and they'd throw something at you. I wouldn't even, I'd have to say, huh, because I say, huh, to everything, whether if I hear them or not. It's gotten to be such a habit. I try to catch myself, and Anita will say something from the other side of the room, and I'll just, instead of saying, huh, I'll just go walking toward her, hoping I've guessed right. And by the time I get to her, I'll have a clue. But I honestly have no clue. Guys, you've been there. Everybody's been there. Your wife says something, you just start walking because you're not sure what she said, but you're tired of saying huh, and this huh going back and forth. What? Huh? My two favorite words are huh? What? Huh? Huh becomes what? Like what and huh is what? So I've gotten pretty good at that word, but I'm trying to do better. So I decided the best thing to do is just get up and start moving in that area, and maybe by the time I get to her, I'll have a clue of what's going on. When she was in her boot, I did know what was going on. I knew I had to help her get something, so I didn't have to say huh at all. I mean, I knew when I heard her voice, just go, and I'll figure it out before I get there. Anyway, listen. It's a great world we live in. The Lord has blessed us so much. And all these armies and all this confusion. Would you hate to have lived in Syria or Egypt during this time between the Testaments? And there's more to come. Antiochus Epiphanes IV comes up, and you know how evil he was. We've already read about him in chapter 8. And there's more about him and how wicked this man was. And he is a precursor of the Antichrist to come. That's why he's mentioned in chapter 11, because Daniel's going to start talking about the man of sin to come. And he is going to be these guys hear all this murder and killing of each other and brothers and sisters killing each other. Well, the lady that's going to be mentioned here is Cleopatra. She is in the Bible in this chapter. So all this murder and intrigue and all this stuff. Richard Burton and what was her name that played?
Liz Taylor.
Who?
Liz Taylor.
Yes, Elizabeth Taylor. Thank you. See, I said to say huh. I knew what you said, but huh is a habit. Help me, people. Help me. And wouldn't you have hated to have lived the life they lived? And have you been watching this Johnny Depp thing? Why are we so concerned about Johnny Depp when we got crisis overseas, Israel, crisis in our land? Why are we worried about Johnny Depp? Bless his heart, he is a mess with a capital M-E-S-S. They showed us his finger being cut off. She threw a wine bottle at him and cut the tip of his finger off. And we've had to look at these gross pictures of his finger. How many hasn't seen them? Now, come on. All right. Well, take a look at it. It's real good. It's real interesting. And once you look at his finger, you're going to listen to the whole sorry episode. These people have no idea what reality is. When you live a make-believe life in the movies, how are you going to react in real life? How are you going to, if you're always in a character, how are you going to, who are you? Do you really know who you are? No wonder these actors take drugs and kill themselves. No wonder these people in this story here of these nations are so unhappy. They're never satisfied. They're always after something else. When we found Jesus, we are satisfied. We came to the river of the water of life, and we drank from it, and we are satisfied. I have lived, I'm 65 years old. I've never found anyone who trusted Christ that's ever not been satisfied. That ever said, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't become a Christian. I wish I'd have never known Jesus. I've never heard that, and I never will.